I think we'll get going with this session. So welcome. This is session 11, which is moving in between still and falling bodies. And we have presenting today Catelijne Coopmans, Sue Walters, Kevin Ellis, Emma Astra, and Lin Westmoreland. Let's start with Catelijne, and hopefully we'll be able to hear you fine.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Catelijne Coopmans. I am an independent life, career, and writing coach and an embodied facilitator. And I have a background in PhD in science and technology studies, and I still keep a toehold in the academic world with my own work through engagements like these. And the talk I want to give today is called Learning to Fall. And I want to begin with just standing here and breathing, feeling my body, taking up space, feeling the contact with the floor, with the air around me. Looking at you, those of you I can see, who aren't very many, and imagining those I can't see, getting a sense of your presence here with me. Breathing as a way to be here. Now, breathing is also very important if you want to learn how to fall, which, as a practitioner of karate, I want to do. The ability to fall, writes an adept of the famous movement teacher Moshe Feldenkrais in a foreword to one of his books, requires a very high level of coordination between the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems and full self-control. If we stiffen or hold our breath, we do ourselves harm. If we can learn to roll, there is no problem. Those few words explain so perfectly how I injured myself a year ago in the dojo. Despite being quite scared of falling, I gave the more experienced man I was partnering with permission to throw me to the floor. I hurled myself into the encounter. I'm quite sure I held my breath. I know for a fact that I stiffened. My foot doubled over in a weird way, and I bruised 2 toes. 6 months later, I asked my sensei for falling lessons. The injury by that time had healed, but my fear had only grown. Now, every time an exercise involved throwing and falling, my heart began racing, my throat would constrict, and tears would come to the surface. I didn't want to harm myself again, so I told my peers not to throw me. But seeing others fall with such ease magnified my grief over not being able to do so. Again, that quote, "If we stiffen or hold our breath, we do ourselves harm. If we can learn to roll, there is no problem." I wanted to know if my body and my nervous system, my body-mind in a word, could learn. We've gotten somewhere in the 8 lessons I've had so far. I've been slowly learning not to resist going down and to slap the mat with my hand and arm at the last moment. I've been learning to let myself fall to control the landing. And also not to take control too early, letting my partner direct me at least halfway. But my body-mind hasn't only been learning, it has also continued to teach. Slow throws were fine, but when Javi, my sensei, upped the speed, reading my body as ready, I felt floored, defeated. It felt violent to me. My neck stiffened and it ached for days. I couldn't get it not to stiffen. And we needed to dial down the intensity, back to gentle and super slow. Besides coming up against this edge, my body-mind has also been showing me something else. I often feel a sense of calm enoughness and peace after a lesson. And sometimes, on my bike, on the way back, I nearly collapse with gratitude for the privilege of the experience. And it is through this mix of emotions that learning to fall is becoming a cultural probe, a social, cultural, embodied learning I can't yet put my finger on exactly, but I'm beginning to see glimpses of. Sure enough, my learning capacities and growth have been invested in before. By a piano teacher, by academic mentors, by coaches, I'm sure that I have had more support and encouragement than most. But this, in an important sense, I feel isn't even about me. It is about all bodies that consciously or unconsciously learn to hold their breath and stiffen, to stay upright that way. I'm thinking of my mother-in-law, of friends, neighbors, clients, and so many fellow academics that I know. And the social cultural conditions that create and normalize these embodiments, making it so hard to fathom that we could live otherwise. These falling lessons, for me, are not to achieve anything special. I'm not a competitive athlete. I don't have a high belt. I'm a middle-aged, moderately fit woman. Nor are they really to remedy a problem. I could forever tell my peers that I don't want to fall, a very viable option in my dojo, and that would be that. These lessons and the learning they provide, to me, are an ordinary story, yet one of utmost importance. That quote again, if we stiffen or hold our breath, we do ourselves harm. If we can learn to roll, there is no problem. I want us all to be taught this, and that's why I can't waste the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Catelijne. So we'll move straight on to Sue Walters.
Thank you. Carry on, don't mind me. I think it's rather hard to ignore you.
Did we have the
No, I've got a different problem.
Okay.
So I'm talking to the laptop, yeah?
Yes,
For the
please.
sound, okay. Right, do my best.
Yeah.
Sitting still. If you were to dare to engage now with your body here in this room, what would it tell you? I sat in a workshop a while ago. It was a really excellent workshop, really. I found myself following the flow of the workshop, which was about re-engaging the body. There was a great irony. The more I followed the direction of the workshop and brought my body into the scheme of things, the more my body made itself known to me and the less engaged I was in the workshop. As I tried to take part in a writing activity, all that would come out of my pen was my body whispering its discomforts to me. My lips were dry. I found myself writing in a piece about the language of dying. I must put on some lipstick. Writing about a summer blue sky and the words, "The waistband of my leggings is pushing too tightly on my belly," appeared on the page. Earlier in the day, in another activity, I had been asked to pretend to be a woman turned to stone. It was unbearable. My body, usually banished, quiet, was quietly making itself known. Messages were coming through the first time. The chair was hard. I felt stiff, too still. Sitting still there on a hard chair in a circle in the workshop room. I ached. I wanted to move. I wanted more than anything in the world to dance. Outside, in the sun, dance music began to play. It led me to thinking about what I asked my body to do every time I went to an academic workshop or conference. I've got my pages out of line. If you were to dare to engage with your body now, here in this room, what would it tell you? I haven't been to an academic conference in person for 6 years. I had thought it was because I was weary of the content, the words, the language, the debate, the sense of not really belonging. But no. All in a rush, sitting still there with the music playing outside, I realized that my conference phobia was all about having to sit still, not move, pay attention, subdue my body so it wasn't even present to me. Here I am attending a conference to share with you why I don't attend conferences. What if I were to dare to engage with my body now, here in this room? What would it tell me? What if I was to bring my body into the room? I cannot imagine it. At the thought of presenting here today, my body froze in anticipation. My friend Debbie said to me, "I always think of you dancing, not as an academic." My friend Debbie asked me, "How can you bring your dancing, living, sensuous body into your academic world?" How can I? How do you? Can you share with me something of how you do that? Do you do it? Can you share with me something of how it is for you? It strikes me that we have started to attempt to dismantle the structures and strictures that squeeze us too tightly in our academic writing, to loosen the straitjacket. But have we started to discuss the structures and strictures that keep our bodies subdued, out of the way, unengaged in conferences, as participants, as presenters? Foucault tells us about docile bodies and learning in classrooms, having that discipline of the body instilled into one, subjugation, self-surveillance, governmentality. The first months for some years of school are about learning to sit still. Simply that. As an ex-teacher, I have watched it over and over and over again. Watched through the years the other ways the young body is disciplined and made to sit still and behave. To learn the bodily discipline of when to stand and when to sit, how to sit, where to look, where not to look, to show the teacher that you are paying attention and you are respectful. On into adulthood. My friend Debbie asked me, how can you bring your dancing, living, sensuous body into your academic world? Do I want to? Bell Hooks encourages all in the academy to end the body-mind split, our inheritance from Western philosophy. She describes university classrooms as places where the body has had to be erased, to go unnoticed. She asks us all to stop entering learning spaces as if only the mind is present. But I find later in the same paper, quoting from the work of Jane Gallup, Hooks puts forward that men can start to think through the body and be seen as serious. Women have to prove they are thinkers, and that this is easier when they are disembodied. Perhaps the separation of the body from the mind is still a sanctuary for white, middle-class academic women like me. It's still the only way of claiming a place in the academy. It's a strategy that's only allowed white women. Black and women of colour and disabled women are never able to leave their bodies at the door to go unnoticed. Women's bodies have always been put under the spotlight, appraised, assessed. We fought so hard in the 80s and 90s not to be reduced to our bodies, our biology. My greatest wish in academia is to be recognised as having a mind. What am I doing letting my body even whisper to me about its desires, its rumblings, its sensations and needs? We will be undone. I will be undone. And now, my friend Debbie asked, what is the reconciliation dance between the academic you and the physical, sensuous dancing you? Do I dare to dance that dance? Do I risk it? If you were to dare to engage with your body now, here in this room, what would it tell you? How would it move? Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you. Anybody wants to move your body, be free to do so. What an invitation. Great. Okay, so next we have Kevin Ellis with Divine Dancing. Kevin, over to you.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we're good. Yeah.
And can I share my screen, do you think?
Yes.
I think so. Good morning, it's good to be here with you virtually. Divine Dancing is my title. I'm a minister, a vicar in the church in Wales, and live on the Llŷn Peninsula in the northern corner. Dancing and theology probably seem strange bedfellows, but in the Christian tradition, one of the descriptions of the Trinity has been dancing from the church fathers onwards. I'm not a dancer, I'm the wrong shape. I like creativity, and dancing sometimes fills me with horror. It dates from school when during rainy gym sessions we were forced into a sports hall, and girls and boys were forced to dance together, barn dancing. And those of you that know about circle dancing and barn dancing knows that you have to swap partners. Well, that led to chaos in our gym hall because you obviously saw who you're going to dance with next. And some of us opted to dance with somebody else. So whenever Mrs. Cadona yelled, change partner, chaos ensued. But dancing and I don't really go together. I am a vicar, and I've engaged with all sorts of radical methodologies, from liberation theology to feminist, womanist, Black and Asian, LGBTIQ theologies. And yet moving to Wales caused me to think about everything afresh. As an Englishman, I moved to a place that had been colonized. And to my surprise, I found myself dancing with the fact that I'm representative of a colonial power. I dance in the borderlands between England and Wales. I'm English, but I speak Welsh. For those I live amongst and minister to, I speak a second language all the time. I'm a vicar deciding what my role is now as the church and its influence ever decreases. Those are all images of clergy from the TV. Those of you that might like to know, I'm probably more of a fan of Father Ted than anything else, and probably find myself modeling myself on those inhabitants of Craggy Island. Ethnography and theology sometimes are strange bedfellows too. In autoethnography, I'm often challenged to put myself at the center of my research. In theology, sometimes we're not. Schooled in asking ancient stories and trying not to get involved. That's a bit different though when you're in a pulpit preaching. Epiphany and autoethnography of autoethnography tests myself, forces me to examine who I am, shines a light on how I connect with my communities, collaboratively working together to make a new story. I live as a fragile person in a fragile place. Autoethnography shows up my inconsistencies and my vulnerabilities as I learn to dance with myself. And sometimes, dare I say it, enjoy the dance. But is there room for the divine dance, for the divine in autoethnography? Is my experience of the divine legitimate data? The jury seems to be out at times, but I dance because I've discovered the richness of autoethnography, of asking myself challenging questions, of taking myself seriously, of learning to love myself and the divine with me. And because autoethnography illuminates all that I am and challenges me to become and to be. So hopefully you too would want to dance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Wonderful. Okay, so let's move to Emma Astra, who hopefully should be joining us online as well.
She's online, but her camera's muted, so I can't show her.
Oh, okay. Okay, so Emma, your camera is muted. Is that an option to unmute or?
Yes, I need a camera to be able to. There she is.
Okay. Okay. Ah, yeah, we see you, Emma.
Thank you.
Hello, can you see and hear me?
We can.
Okay, I'm going to be sharing a video for my presentation, and it's a TikTok video. And you might be thinking, why the hell am I sharing a TikTok video I've done? Well, to give some context behind it, I'm a PhD student, and my thesis title is called The Diary of a Disabled PhD Student, exploring the impact of showing lived experience of chronic illness and disability as research. So to do the to explore the impact, you've got to do the engagement, right? So I put my project fully online and I explore impact in different ways. So I've got the Disabled People's Project, for example, where I do biographies of people with disabilities through history to present on different social media platforms in different formats. Then I've got the diary aspect. So if you like, the Facebook and TikTok data collection with all ethics approval for the whole project and everything. And TikTok is an interesting platform because, for example, there's a number of PhD students on there with a PhD handle name, and that's their identity, almost like sharing their journey and almost like an autoethnography of TikTok. And when I think about the impact, I think about my audiences, and I have a number of likes and follows from not just PhD students, but also a diverse background. So lately I've been experimenting in putting a video on TikTok of my conference presentation and delivering that at the conference. And that's been an important reflection on me to explore the impact inside and outside of academia. So I don't know the technology side, whether you're going to share the video your end and put the link in the comments section.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. And then after the video, if later on anyone wants to get in touch with me, feel free to do that or ask any questions. Thank you.
This year's International Autoethnography Conference theme is about dances with experience, metaphorically and physically. I started to think, how will I dance nowadays since chronic illness and disability has taken over my body? More than that, I started to think, how will I get into the nightclub to dance like I used to? To my absolute pleasure, I got accepted to do a talk at this year's conference with this very question. Seeing Musa Moda dance with his crutches on this year's Britain's Got Talent initially inspired me to get back into dancing and these questions. I look back, I think, through my old memories, like rose-tinted nostalgia, I think. I'm not sure if they were really the good old days or not. But one thing is for sure, I knew how to party. Work hard and play hard, as the saying goes. As I worked hard to climb the career ladder back in the day, a chronic illness started with ulcerative colitis in 2015 and spiraled from there. And I'm now advised to use crutches and a wheelchair. Long story. I need quick access to a toilet for bowel and bladder issues too, to do with the ulcerative colitis. But fatigue and illness are unreal. The last time I experienced going out dancing in the city nightlife scene was around 10 years ago. I used to have a swanky flat in Leicester city centre. I worked hard climbing the career ladder during the week, then Friday and Saturday night hit, and I just about hit all the bars and clubs in Leicester city centre. Beaver Street used to be a popular Leicester place, bars lined up with Jaeger bombs and high heels, which I couldn't even walk in properly back then. Now I'm wearing what looks like school shoes. But at least I could explore nightlife before chronic illness and disability. But shouldn't access for all disabled people be the same if they weren't disabled? We have seen the social model of disability being dominant, even though Professor Tom Shakespeare highlights as outdated and excludes chronic illness. With his strides of daytime buildings being accessible, yet nightlife seems somewhat different. Comedian Lee Ridley, aka the Lost Boys guy, highlights in his autobiography, some people think disabled people go to bed at 6 PM, and he experienced his days when crutches, and the bouncers thought he was drunk when he was that. So it's so What's that feeling that nightlife isn't accessible for disabilities and chronic illness by preconceived notion? As I still lives in nightlife with pre-disability such a long time ago. I started to list my old dancing halls from back in the day. I wouldn't name the bars and clubs here because this isn't a dig at any particular establishment, but listing them down, 8 out of 10 would be inaccessible to me now due to the layout or toilet access to me now, which I used to go in before disability. 4 out of 5 nightclubs would even be more inaccessible than the bars. For example, 4 have stairs straight away upon entry, either up or down to the basement. Never mind the inaccessibility of toilets and no lifts. My mind wanders back again. I remember with a disability and chronic illness, dancing the night away until 6 a.m. in the morning, seeing daylight. Maybe it's an age thing, not just disability that I'm cooking in the face of now. So anyway, I'm planning for this presentation. I thought I would go with my best friend around bars and nightclubs to Leicester to research how accessibility nightlife is for disability and chronic illness. If my preconceived notion for once, this proved easier said than done, and some things didn't anticipate. The main issue for the night in question was how would I get there? Transport is an under-researched area for disability and chronic illness. I planned to order a dancing taxi to take my main wheelchair, and then I realised I couldn't go forward to be points with incontinence anxiety, and that won't exactly wait around for me to get out the door. Let's not talk about adaptive parts for this presentation, otherwise I'll be ranting all day for another multi-layer system disabled people have to navigate. So I compromised and looking at my dad took me in his car, which resulted in me turning back to a child. Then getting ready car, which I didn't realise was it's okay. Pizarro touchscreen theory in 2003, which resonates significantly with me. An able person may have unlimited spoons to an extent, but a person with chronic illness has a maximum of 12 spoons to spread through the day, and each task takes a number of spoons. So that leads to spoon deprivation to come. I got my hairdryer out. I realised I hadn't used it in 8 years because I let my hand dry naturally since chronic illness. I'm surprised it still worked. It tired me out. I then realised I wouldn't be able to wear makeup because I developed 2 types of eczema, which means I'm heavily reactive to makeup and anything scented. Then my friend texted me her hay fever was bad and could we just go out for a meal as she won't be up to the bars and nightclub. Sometimes when you're absorbed with chronic illness and disability, you forget about the needs of the other person. And that's what I initially did for my best friend. On the way into town, I don't get that at all. Parents give out their teenagers on nights out. The weather was hot and sunny. Saturday, the 26th of May, 2023, one of the bank holidays. The town was busy. We went to the restaurant in St. Martin's Square. Wow, like a holiday atmosphere. They've made this place so nice. We sat around a table which couldn't exactly fit my wheelchair that well, but I compromised. As the city changed and redeveloped, so have my circumstances, life and body. I now dance other ways. My disability has enabled me to do other things I wouldn't necessarily have done. One of them being my PhD. I'm still figuring out if that's a good thing or not. I get back home, I stayed in my bedroom. I go on TikTok. I see a number of DJs playing Saturday night music sets. My mind wanders back again. I remember back to lockdown and Coopmans started this isolation nation night in this kitchen. They were so popular on Instagram Live and sold merchandise. When lockdown finished, those were them nights. But for us with disability and chronic illness, lockdown is normal before and after COVID time. I'm glad more DJs are taking to playing sets on TikTok. I start to dance on my bed, playing the music. The phone starts to move with me. I'm reading people's comments. I feel connected, free. I'm unsure if I'll go into a nightclub in the future as a literally plan for this video. Maybe that'll be part 2. As I reflect on the night out, it wasn't accessibility of the buildings I originally planned to explore. It became how the heck do I get there? Ironically, the title of some of my other talks to do with chronic illness and disability. But now I'm going to sleep with TikTok and a hot chocolate. Thank you for listening and taking a ride with me on this journey.
Great, thank you, Emma.
Thank you very much.
We'll take questions at the end. Okay, great. Okay, good. And so finally today we have Lin Westmoreland with the presentation Pandiculation, a somatic improvisational tool as expedient, philosophy and joyous dance practice in an age of anxiety. I don't know why I chose to read yours out and nobody else. Anyway.
My presentation.
There we go.
Yeah, so my title, just as Jamie said. Oh, down, isn't it? That one. That one. I'll sit here and click. Okay. I'm a PhD student at the Centre for Dance Research in Coventry, and this is the title of my PhD project. And basically, I'm not really going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about this notion of pandiculation, which has become central to my research. I didn't intend it to, but it kind of found its way in. But it's something, pandiculation is something I've been exploring in my own dance and movement practice for about 10 years. When I came across it when I did some training in something called Hanna somatics, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Thomas Hanna. So basically, my PhD is practice-based. So as well as kind of work I'm doing with participants and other interviewing and moving with other practitioners, is I'm also, my own practice is a central part of it and feeding through it all. So I'm kind of here really to say that autoethnography doesn't have to be with words, and I'm going to try and convey that a little bit more as we go through. Yeah. So what is pandiculation? So basically, if you go online and Google it, it'll tell you that it comes from a Latin root. I can't even bother to say the word. It basically means to stretch. But it isn't stretch at all. It's something more than that. And also, if you delve a bit deeper, people might talk about how it's about resetting our nervous system, but I think it's also deeper than that. And again, I'm going to try and convey that a little bit. For me, in terms of my research, it's been a kind of gateway into philosophy and theory, which I was a bit like this about when I started. And I've also discovered it's my escape route out because it brings me full circle. I started with pandiculation and movement, and I've been able to move through philosophy and theory and come out the other side with my body still intact. It's my research methodology, and it's a personal narrative that feeds into all my data collection, data analysis, fieldwork, etc., etc. And sorry, I was just going to.
Oh, sorry.
So the photograph there, and I'm going to show some photographs, more photographs of me moving. This is something akin to pandiculation. And actually, I'd just like to take a moment out from this and get you moving a little bit. I'm going to get you moving a bit more later. Just sitting down for now. I'd just like you to just bring your attention to your breath for a moment. Perhaps place your hand on your belly or your chest and just notice your breathing. And as you notice that breathing, just start to deepen it a little bit. And then at some point, as you take a deep breath in, as you breathe out and release, just find some kind of expansion or lengthening or yawning. So breathing in and then out. Releasing. And you can find out how you can use your arms, big movements, or it might just be a small movement. And this is kind of akin to what we mean by pandiculation. Now, actually, I'm going to get you to do more than that now. So I'm going to invite you to stand up if you're happy to, or you can stay sat down as well, and just get a little bit of space, or maybe stand side on, which you are going to be moving. So again, this is an invitation, you don't have to do it. So again, coming back to the breath, just taking a deep breath. So what you're going to do, I'm going to demonstrate it first, is taking a deep breath in, and then on the out breath, we're just going to close up a little bit, contract in the front of the body, And then on the out breath, you're going to open out and lengthen across the front of the body. So we can do that. So breathing in, breathing out, and just contracting a bit. And then breathing in and opening out and lengthening. One more time. Breathing out and contracting in. And then breathing in and opening out. Lovely. So I hope you feel a bit more energized, and you haven't just had to sit still in a conference. So that's a benefit too. Yes, I'm just going to do a whistle-stop tour through philosophy and theory behind it that I've kind of woven my way through around the pandiculation, and then bring it back to my own practice. So Thomas Hanna basically said there are certain cosmic events that continue unchanged within the biological layer of life forms. And the most general of these events has to do with movement. So this is about movement being at the center of everything. It's a story that starts from, the cosmic sense right through every layer, right down to the, through us, through humans, through everything, to the sort of most microscopic little thing. And he says that there's 3 patterns of movement in the cosmos. Okay, next slide. So the first pattern of movement is what he calls individuation or standing out. So this is this kind of taking our place in the world. It's a kind of a little bit of a contraction, a kind of being in place, and where we have our sort of individual existence, as what he called, Thomas Hanna calls somas. Next slide. The second pattern of movement is momentum. So we go from standing to that opening out and moving forward, taking momentum, moving through space. So he calls it the expansive energetic thrust from the original center of the cosmos. This primordial flow of all existence creates a constant directionality and somatic process. The functions of somas are always inclined forward in adaptation to the next event. So we come back to this idea of pandiculation, of being standing still, slight contraction, and opening out forward. But the third pattern of movement is a really important one, which is this next one, which is he calls maneuver. So as well as standing and moving forward, we have maneuverability, and this sort of brings in the rest of the body, the side of the body. So we have differentiated directional movements. We have spin, the ability to rotate, and a word I often use is undulate, because once you start moving, once you start from contraction and move out and start filling on the side body, what you start to get is this lovely undulation in the body. And this quote from Tim Ingold, he talks about the matrix, and I just put this here because I love this, what he talks about, that the matrix is in effect a tangled mesh of paths of coming and going laid down by people as they make their way from place to place. And for me, that's what pandiculation is all about. It's about how we exist within this matrix of living, fundamentally. So quickly into philosophy. So I came across this work by Rolf von Eckartsberg, who was working around the psychology of existential phenomenology in psychology. And basically he's talking about pandiculation here. So whereas living is unique and particular, i.e. existential, so that's the uniqueness, the individuation, the standing. Phenomenology is the universal, the essential, the moving out into the world of experience. But what he does is he asks this question, he takes it to this other place. And he says, our life takes place within this tension, in between these levels of participation. And that's really, I think, the key to pandiculation, the transformative nature of it, which has been so important to my research. And he says, And he kind of talks to this by saying, with some justification, we can say that the mystery of existential phenomenology is concealed in the hyphen itself. So it's that bit in the middle, it's the transition between standing, being individuated, and moving out into the general cosmos of living. And it's not one or the other that's important, it's the moving between them. So we don't get stuck here, and we don't get stuck moving constantly, because that's stress and anxiety. But we're constantly moving backwards and forwards, and that's what life and living, and going back to Thomas Hannah, that sort of the way of being a soma is. I've completely lost track of my notes and my cards, and I've just gone off on one. So I'll carry on. Yeah, so it brings in this notion of moving between. And Jill Hayes is a dancer, and she said, we begin to have a sense of balancing cyclic movement in the body, such as the perennial dance of extension and contraction, the spine and the body opening and closing. And this is the real importance for me of dance and working in the realm of fear and anxiety, which is what my research is about helping people to find that perennial dance of extension and contraction. Thank you. Actually, we'll skip that because and this is a quote from Catelijne Roy, which is about dance improvisation. She says, in the exquisite experience of the not yet, in the tension between the past and the possible, in the disorientation of the gap, something unpredictable and non-habitual will appear. And for me, that's that notion of transformation. Yeah. So, these are a couple of other kind of thoughts. So, just because it then starts as we start to move, and we move with others, and we move with other bodies, other somas in the world, we strike up this notion of relationship. Again, Catelijne Roy talks about this relationship as being like a rhizomatic network, like rhizomes in the soil. How we, as we move between and we move with others, in this omnidirectional way, that we create relationships. And Nora Bateson talks about transcontextual theory, which, you know, again relates very much to the idea of pandiculation, saying constant natural process of things shifting and calibrating in relationship. And we do that simply through this very simple movement of opening and closing and moving through that in multi-directional kind of ways. And then you have a dance. Yeah. Okay. So, as I said, my practice is very much central to my research, and it's so I've always kind of had my own practice, but back in October I'd had a couple of years of quite bad illness and a lot of pain, and I started doing a daily morning practice barefoot in the garden, and it always starts from a place of pandiculation. So I come out and I open myself to my context, whatever is, you know, the wind or frost or whatever, rain, sun, whatever it is, and what I'm bringing in my own body. And that's carried on, and I feel it's the one thing that's kept me well. And this is me doing my morning practice on the deck of a ferry going down to Santander in northern Spain, early in the morning when there was nobody else about. So, and I'm kind of showing these pictures to show that this way of kind of expressing my own story, my own practice, it's become, and that's why I call it a sort of joyous tool and an expedient philosophy, because it's kind of there, it's convenient, it's in our bodies, in the moment. We can all do it. We can all just open and close. It's the most simplest thing in the world, to my mind. Yes, it's just a few more photographs. This is in a garden of a place we were staying in northern Spain. And this is in the Pyrenees, on the top of place called Montsegur, where the Catelijne Chateau, if anybody knows it. And again, I'm showing this because about narrative and story. Montsegur is an incredibly special place for me for a story which I haven't got time to go into. But this, about a month ago, we were there, and the next four show this practice of pandiculation and a shape of movement that I started to feel when I was in this place. And that's my garden. And again, this is my daily morning pandiculation, which I used to do morning pages, and I now have my morning pandiculation. And the importance of it for me and for the work that I do is that I constantly find that it feeds in to what I'm doing in the daytime. So I moved this morning and I started to have new thoughts about what I was going to say today. And when I was doing my workshops with participants for my PhD, people with anxiety, every time I had a workshop, I'd go out in the morning and I might have formulated some sort of plan, but I'd kind of get an insight or a thought that, no, this is what I've got to do with them today. And it's just been rich. It's just been, an amazing practice. And I think I'm probably, so moving between the hyphen, contracting, expanding, sadness, joy, falling, rising, right, wrong, movement, stillness. Sue was saying stuckness, movement, which is very relevant to working with people with mental health problems. Giving up, going on, life, death. In between is the gap, is living, and possibility of relationship, connection, and transformation. I think that's probably it. There's a little thing you can read there, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you. Okay, so I think we have about 20 minutes, or maybe a little bit more than 20 minutes even, for questions or comments, responses. Okay, so I shall open it up to the floor or to anybody online. If you want to use the thingy, the icon, hand raised. Just whilst people think, I have a question which kind of loops around actually to Catelijne. In fact, just I was interested in terms of whether you had any responses to what Lin's just been sharing as the final presenter there, in terms of the issue of fear. Okay, I think you in your research you used to feel the fear and do it anyway. Yeah. But you're also introducing a very specific kind of bodily practice to be able to kind of facilitate or afford something. And Catelijne as well, that there's a very specific kind of practice, a very specific kind of way of learning to hold your body and move and to breathe in order to be able to perhaps feel a fear, but be able to kind of get beyond that and to learn to fall in a particular way. So I was just interested the kind of connections there. And so I don't know whether Catelijne, you want to respond at all to that.
Yeah, I can say a couple of things. I was just writing down some notes that I think relate to that. And it's like what struck me listening to Lin is that and actually all the presentations had some of this, is that this movement and kind of staying in the in-between and staying in movement is both the simplest and the hardest thing. So it's both simple because it's natural, and it's also, I think, really hard because of the various ways in which it gets stopped and blocked, and that takes place that's always both the naturalness and the stopping is in the interdependencies between that we live in our lives. So we're constantly mirroring one another, and we're creating spaces together in which movement possibilities are differently patterned. And I'm really struck by the different invitations that we've been getting throughout the conference of sometimes literally getting up and moving. And sometimes, as Sue was doing, saying, what if you could let your body move in any way it wanted to, without saying, let's get up and do it, but just seeding that thought. And just noticing kind of my own reactions to that, and the various ways in which that feels awkward and inviting, I think tells us a lot about what those interdependencies are, and both that, like, it's both the easiest or both a simple thing and a really hard thing. So that maybe I'll leave it there.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Catelijne. Yes, yeah. So other questions or responses? And just also an invitation, if you want to move your body in any way you want to, just, yeah, let's respond to that invitation as well. Or anybody online.
Ben, can I ask, I'm really interested in what you're saying about the movement between them, how you kind of represent that with height, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, can you talk a little bit more about how you do it in your inquiry? In a sense, I mean, it's very much about the processual, isn't it? It's about moving all the time. But if you've got like 2 poles or whatever, how can you, I mean, how are you writing? I mean, are you writing your thesis, or are you yeah, so how do you, I mean, I'm interested in, I mean, is your writing going to be representational of something, or is there a sense in which your writing will be full of expression and not alluding to something in particular? I don't know if that makes any sense. It's a question.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have an answer. It's a
Oh,
question. Yeah, it's a question in my own mind.
Yeah.
For sure, of how to bring this quality into written research, really.
Yeah.
And I think autoethnography, I mean, I said, you know, autoethnography doesn't have to be about words, but then again, you know, it does have to be, you know, it's going to have to be, as well as that movement, it's going to have to be words as well.
Yeah.
And you know, what I want to try and find is a way to read a sense of movement with creativity, with my own words, my own reflections on movement, with theory and data and
sounds like it's Erin Manning, in one of her own books, it's called Politics of Touch. She talks about tango,
right,
and the kind of freestyle in between, in terms of the movement between the partners. I mean, she writes in a very poetic kind of way. I'm not saying you should emulate that, but that's why I asked the question. It's got a challenge, isn't it?
Yes, it is a huge challenge, and I'm only beginning to realise what a challenge it is. I'm kind of moving from that field work stage, which has been incredibly rich and amazing, to thinking about I've got to analyse. But I've got to do something. And I've got to, you know, we've had conversations about that, about creative ways of, you know, bringing the body into a thesis. You know, how do you do that? You know, as much as I've got a title for my PhD, I feel it's also about that. You know, how do we do it?
Between you and the title.
Yes. But you know, essentially the idea of the hyphen, come back to the beginning, is really about, with all these things, with questions, with challenges, with difficulties, with, you know, wherever we are in the moment, whatever we bring, illness, disability, you know, all sorts of things that we keep moving between, and that we keep moving between. We don't have to be answered if such thing like this. We can much more feel our way into the next step.
Come back and present next year to see how you get us to see how you're moving with it.
Yeah. I realise I've made a mistake here, but I'm not inviting you forward. So apologies to the people online who won't have been able to hear all of that. So if Lynn and Sue, if you could come and Sue sit. Disciplined into
Okay, so apologies if people online didn't hear all of that.
We have another question from the back. So if you could say your name and just speak really loudly.
Hi, it's Kate. I had a question for Sue. Really interested in the different cells and like how you look at cells were asking how do you do that? Do you feel like you have? How do you do it?
Well, I think being here is a way of exploring that. So I have been thinking about that all the time I've been here, because it's true. It really is my first conference in person in 6 years, and about how I feel about being here as a mind, but also as a body in space. I don't have an answer, and my presentation was physically, I hope to represent in the presentation the sitting still, and then the opportunity to move. And do I feel like doing a little bit of a dance movement? Do I feel like a little? But because of the constraints of the technology, actually, I thought it was ironic or very revealing in a way that I had to stay very still here and couldn't do that. But whether if the technology hadn't been what it was, I probably wouldn't have moved. I left it to see how much I wanted to risk in the moment. And I think it really didn't want to risk it. It feels too vulnerable.
You did feel really intentional sitting.
Yeah. Yeah. But I would love to hear from people about what their response is to that question about how do you bring your whole self here? How do you embody when you come to this kind of environment? I mean, this conference is very different. There's much more of an opportunity to move here. But when you go to ordinary conferences, do other people have the experience I have? How do you respond? Do you cut yourself off from here?
I think you've got to make them extraordinary and do something with those boring ordinary conferences.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I have a question for Ken when the other questions finish.
Okay. Yes, another question.
I have a question for Lin, and how your interventions work. You have like music, your movement with your students, the people you're working with.
Yeah.
Are you facing these movements of opening these moves on my birthday in March? I think it's cool. So you just have to move with the music. You just do whatever you want. You can take a t-shirt off. It's basically me and all people. I mean, it's nice. Is it no different moving and breathing?
Yeah.
How long does it take you?
So the question for those online was about how that looks in practice. Yeah, these interventions that of Lin and her research.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. So one of the things that I've been doing is I've also, alongside the work with the workshops, I've been doing what I've called sort of embodied movement dialogues with practitioners of various forms of improvisational dance therapy, and somatic work. And so it's not just me and what I think, I've been trying to bring in lots of different ways of moving, but the opening closing is a kind of motif that goes through it, I suppose. But I use music, I use movement without music, starting a lot of the time just with real sensing in, which is the somatic side, the sort of breath, body, feet, grounding, sensing in, feeling space, being in relationship with others, and then bringing in much more of a sort of dance artistry kind of element, which is where we kind of improvise to create loose choreographies. But the whole point of the opening and closing is to have that as a fundamental basic, which people bring into every exercise we do. So I might get people moving in partnership with scarves, so they're in relationship, but they're doing it in a pandiculation kind of way, so they can, because particularly with people with anxiety who are very stuck, to get them to kind of, you can move and open towards somebody, but when you feel uncomfortable, you can close back up, and that's absolutely fine. Yeah, so I don't know whether that answers your question. So we create little dance pieces, and we lie on the floor and breathe, and we roll, and we just do a bit of free form to music, and we do partner work. And so it's a whole sort of mix of lots of things. So I hope that answers your question.
And Elise, we have you online.
What a wonderful panel, a kind of somatic kaleidoscope. Each presenter, in a way that movement or dance transforms, think of the body this way, move it this way, find these constraints. And so one of the ways that my body becomes involved is I'm moving. You can't quite see me sitting here, but it moves in relationship to each of these. So thank you very much. And it's so nice to see Sue and Lin that I got to work with in workshop not too long ago, but to learn from your practice here was lovely. I want to say something particularly to Emma, though. So deeply moving as someone who was trained as a dancer, for whom movement was much of my practice, now living with very significant arthritis that has changed my body in ways that I feel that I'm always falling in a bad way, smacking the mat, you know, to go back to Catelijne, and that the two of you together have really helped me reconceptualize, not as accommodation, but as a creative way of finding new avenues, of not fighting against that, of rolling with it. And so I have so much that I'm going to take from the two of you to reconceptualize my body now, as opposed to mourning the loss of a body that I used to be. And so for that opening, thank you so much. And a moment to Ken. I'm sorry, Kevin, who I think of as the vicar. I am always so moved by your presentations. I think I heard you for the first time about 3 years ago. You were talking about funerals. And giving funerals in the midst of the beginning of COVID. You, I think, exemplify the critical reflexivity to speak into your own vulnerabilities. And so you begin this panel about those terribly awkward, I don't dance and I feel awkward and I have these memories of, you know, dancing in gym class. And it's from that, your dislocations, that you find such richness. So every time I get my program for one of these, truly the first thing I do, Kevin, is go through and look for the vicar. And I mark that. I want to go hear what you have to say. You are always instructing me and what it means to reflect upon our habits. And surely here as well, as I hear you think about dancing and the vulnerability of what that might mean in your life and in your body. So thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Elise. Kevin, would you like to respond at all?
That was just very generous. I don't really have anything to add.
Yeah, I was putting you on the spot, really.
It's kind of nice. It's kind of nice to have been appointed vicar to the autographic community.
Yeah. Great. Catelijne, you have your hand up.
Yes. I wanted to ask a question to Emma. And I'm not sure if it's a really well-formed question, but it's something that struck me about being out there or getting out there, where and I also have to say I didn't watch your entire video because I switched to trying to watch it through the link where it came across a lot better for me. So I don't know if you addressed this at all, but something about getting out there, being out there, where going out to the clubs and like going there is one thing, but the way you also put yourself out there on TikTok is another, I feel, a dimension to that. And there's also somatics to that, or an embodied form to that way of being out there. And your voice in the video was so engaging and so yeah, there was a particular quality to it that really struck me. So I wanted to hear some reflections on being out there, getting out there, and how like using this approach, making TikTok videos, how that fits into everything.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, my whole sort of research project is sort of out there, if you like, but it's weird because it's kind of like a biggest contradiction going, and maybe I'm reflecting lately, I am a bit contradictory in a lot of ways, and maybe we all are in some respects, but because in a lot of my online stuff I don't actually share my my surname or my physical face, so that's interesting. But yeah, I think an important thing what I'm exploring in my research is this thing of impact and engagement of autoethnography. So it's the audiences, you know, and TikTok has a diverse audience, you know, it's the biggest growing social media. A lot of my stuff is using social media, my research. So it's about how actually autoethnography, there's sort of a way of using social media in all of that engagement and impact. And yeah, it's yeah, not sure if that answered the question. I don't know, but yeah, my brain's gone a bit mugger. But yeah, that's and it helped me doing the physical journey in a way to explore, are my preconceived notions correct, because I was a bit out of touch with the night scene, because, you know, it's been a while. So was it my preconceived not? And actually doing it was a thing. Now, my research a lot is using online stuff, but the actual physical place, you know, was quite an important reflection, obviously, in it all, but using social media to sort of engage all of that and put it all together.
Thank you. Yeah, and it really makes me think too of how these things get interwoven and become maybe also infrastructures for one another. So I know that for me in this project, that the moment I decided that I would document it, that I would write field notes about the falling lessons, it became more doable to keep attending them too. So there's some tethering that goes on through the ways in which we find yeah, possibilities to speak and express and document, I think. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I just listening then, it just reminded me when I was listening to everybody else that, and I'm not really quite sure what it is I'm quite saying with this, or quite how to put it in words. First of all, it was with Catelijne and with your presentation. I was really struck when you said something like, and you were almost on the edge of tears, I think, when you said something about being grateful for something and what a privilege it was to, I can't remember your exact words, but I did write them down. And I was like so touched by that. And also Sue, by yours, when you said, you used the words, again, I wrote these down, which struck me. If you dare to, like that real, oh, I just can't kind of put it into words, but I can feel it, like that kind of, yes, I can open to this. And I think, you know, again, and coming to Kevin, that kind of, that sense of a spirituality, of a kind of stepping out into the world, and also Emma, yours is that kind of, you know, that determination to kind of try to make this journey back to something, to dance, for that experience. And I don't really know what I'm saying. It's sort of like determination, conviction, trepidation, and yeah, I was doing one of these embodied dialogues yesterday with a dancer. She kept talking about conviction, the conviction that we have to kind of move out into the world with our heart and our soul and our, you know, and to dare to find that privilege, to find that gratitude, to find that sort of spiritual experience. And it just kind of, I don't know, it kind of just seemed to run through all that I was listening to. And I don't really know what I'm saying with that. It's just a kind of sense.
Yeah, and I think for me as well, one of the really interesting things to kind of, or challenges from all of the different presentations, is this sense in which there's a desire towards movement and towards freedom, towards freedom of kind of expression. At the same time, as you've rightly pointed out, there are restrictive capacities, both within one's own body in terms of what it affords through and restrictions of disability or chronic illness or whatever, as well as restrictions of expectations, embodied expectations of what a conference, the way one should behave or whatever in various circumstances. And so, but there's also something interesting, and I'm interested to, I don't know whether I'll just put the question out there, but kind of the question of how restrictions may also afford a type of freedom. Because we inevitably are not, like, I would love to be a bird, I would love to fly, I'd love to fly around this room like a bird, but my body doesn't afford it, so there's no complete freedom of movement that in terms of like what I'm able to do. And so there's always going to be that balance between environment and that kind of what you're talking about, that kind of desire to kind of move out there. And so how are the limitations in some way? How do they facilitate their own freedom? I mean, Emma, you spoke to it a little bit in terms of the things that have opened up for you in the last few years. Since you were diagnosed and since your experience of your disability. And so, yeah, it's just, I don't know, any responses from the panel? Yes.
Hi, I'm Tracy.
Tracy.
So you can hear me. And I also feel a bit naive to all of it, right? But everything that you're saying, it's like, I'm really struck by the whole restraints imposed by the socio-political, cultural world that we live in, and it's just making me think, goodness, what if we can break the shackles? And talking about dance, it's like talking about physics of effect, of what I understand to be the physics of effect, and it's talking about kind of agency and activism and change. So I really like the idea of I don't know, drawing on our autoethnographic understanding of movement to consciously affect change whilst acknowledging our privilege and being gratitude for it, which is a way of dealing with various self-restrictions that we impose upon ourselves. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any other thoughts? We have a couple of minutes left. But you also had a question for Ken, so I'm just wondering whether you want to put that in. Ken, since you're going to answer, can I just invite you to come here so that people could hear online? I'm just going to put a seat there.
You might not want to answer.
Yeah, try to answer.
I might not be able to.
Thank you. No, my question was simply that yesterday in your presentation, your keynote, you spoke about Manning, who I'm not familiar with at all, and you were talking about bodying. And what I took yesterday, because it kind of went past very quickly for me, because I'm unfamiliar with it, was that this is something about the body, but in process, constant process. So I wondered if you had anything that you could offer me back in response about my questioning of being embodied and re-engaging with the body and bringing the body into these kinds of spaces. How would Manning and her conception of bodying, what might she have to say about that? I'm asking, is the conception and the idea of bodying helpful? Is it something I should explore?
I mean, I think it's really, really helpful because it talks a bit about what Lin was talking about. It talks about movement all of the time. It's challenging notions of I as being fixed, for example, the whole Cartesian idea of a fixed individual who thinks and therefore exists and so on. So she argues, following people like Whitehead and Deleuze and other people, that the body is always in movement. Every time we have a new encounter, something changes in the body, both in terms of how we have an affect and how we are affected by the encounter. The challenge is how, and it's kind of, I was interested in what Kevin said about epiphanies. I was talking yesterday about haxeities. Catelijne Stewart talks about reals. How do we, and I was asking Lin a question, how do we how do we convey this? How do we get it across? You know, we can't represent it because that's something new anyway, you know? So it's a challenge. I mean, Erin Manning's work specifically, it's worth having a look at. She's got two really lovely active websites. One's called Sense Lab, and the other is called 3 Ecologies. And that is an active space which isn't just about writing. Yeah. So in Sense Lab, for example, she does a lot of work with textiles and fabrics and so on. In the 3 Ecologies, you know, they're farming in a very cold part of Canada. So it's bringing. Well, I'm not sure who said, the person who asked the last question. Tracy, your question, Tracy. What Manning is doing in her 3 Ecologies project is actually bringing movement into affect and having us to understand it and talk about it in different kinds of ways. I mean, an expression that I repeated a number of times in the keynote yesterday, and I meant to do that, was to emphasize it. There should be no happy simplification of method. This is what Whitehead says. You know, so much of qualitative inquiry is about happy simplification. It's dealing with simplicity. We have to work with these massive complexities, yeah, and it's not easy. But I mean, working with process is hard because it's always on the move, and it's worth having a look at her writing. And yeah, I'm not trying to evade your question. It's really important, and I don't know the answer. I just keep trying. Yeah, I just keep trying.
Thank you.
All right.
Brilliant. We're going to have to wrap up there. So just want to thank all of the panelists for a great session. Give them a round of applause.